Dyslexia Guide to Recognizing and Overcoming Dyslexia. Written by Adrian Tweely. Narrated by Weston Gritt. Introduction. I wanted to write a book about dyslexia because loved ones who are dear to me suffer from it. I have investigated and researched the topic elaborately and put my notes in this brief book that can show you the basics of what dyslexia is and what it is not. Moreover, I will go over the symptoms, training programs, and the false concepts that are out there. You'll read these strengths and weaknesses, problems and solutions, causes and consequences. Dyslexia is a disorder, but is often not regarded as such because of its simple origin and the high, intelligent functioning individuals who have it and have success despite of it. What's most important, however, is to know about it. It matters to recognize the symptoms early so that special attention and more patience can be taught to those who try to encourage the children to read. If caught early on, chances of progress increase. The children will have a better chance to learn the right techniques to read faster and more accurately, and the typical mistakes they make will be reversed and set right. I cannot stress enough how essential such knowledge can be for a child's future. Although reading and spelling isn't everything, I would say that almost everyone should be convinced of the money, happiness, and ease of life one could enjoy if only they would learn how to process information through reading it. Look more professional by spelling things correctly, and finding jobs, opportunities, and success in life by all the things that relate to writing and reading correctly. Let's just set things right. People with dyslexia aren't stupid. They are not crazy, and there is nothing wrong with them. The only thing we should take into account is that somehow their brain interprets symbols differently, slower, or in a deviant way. Just like some individuals progress faster in sports, science, or business than others, people with dyslexia can learn how to read, but it may take them a little longer, or they will need to learn to decipher the symbols in front of them in their own way. In this book, you'll read all about it. Enjoy. Chapter 1. What is dyslexia? Those who suffer from dyslexia may have experienced some teasing, exclusion from classes, ridicule, or the frustration of trying to master reading when they are simply more practical than literate. Dyslexia, like any other disorder, can range from extremely present to slightly deviant. What I mean by that is that two people might be labeled as being dyslexic, but one may have a harder time reading than the other. Perhaps the first one just mixes up a few letters, while the second scrambles every letter of the entire alphabet with the others, being left completely confused. So when we talk about being dyslexic, it doesn't always come in the same shape or form. Some people are simply a more severe, less hopeful case than others. Some may learn it fast, while others will struggle all their lives. Those who are dyslexic aren't stuck with a defective brain, but a different one. And cognitive abilities can be dominantly present in their brain, more than some others who don't suffer from dyslexia. That's the first misunderstanding I should clear up. Dyslexia is defined as a disorder that involves difficulty in learning to read or interpret words, letters, and other symbols, but that does not affect general intelligence. Chapter 2. What are the symptoms? I am surprised that some people don't want to admit that their children have dyslexia. I compare it to mold in a house. If you don't find it, and if you don't do an inspection to look for it, you'll never see it there, right? Wrong. Eventually, you will find it, but because all that time you didn't want to know about it, the problem grew bigger and bigger, until perhaps the whole flooring, ceiling, or wall had to be removed because it started spreading. And the same is true for dyslexia. I've heard of people that claim dyslexia doesn't even exist, and that every motivated child can learn how to read just as fast as any other. This is pretty controversial, because even though most children with dyslexia learn how to read, they also achieve this goal with more effort on their part, and more difficulties. Hey, I understand. Not everyone wants to think that there is something wrong with their kid. Not everyone wants to face reality and see it. But those who choose to do so can get help, and because of that, they turn their weaknesses around. If you don't know the problem, you won't adjust your teaching, your learning speed, your assignments, and so much more to the level and needs of the child. Therefore, it is crucial that these things are discovered, and that if a child has dyslexia, he or she will be treated as such. We'll talk more about what to do about it in a different chapter. For now, let's first discuss how to recognize it. I know someone who has dyslexia, and most times, what she does is guess the word based on whether or not she has seen it earlier. She sees a few letters, and then fills in the gaps instead of being able to read each letter separately and make sense out of the spelling. Not that English spelling makes much sense, but that's a different discussion. So when a new word is presented, it's even harder for it because she is forced to read every letter. Reading is not a natural process. It doesn't come instinctively. It is a pattern that must be learned and repeated over and over until the skill has been sufficiently practiced that it becomes more automated. How reading is taught matters, because it influences the way the child learns, and therefore, at which speed. It is never too late to identify someone with dyslexia. Some kids get identified in the 1st or 2nd grade, others in the 3rd grade, and there are even those who don't notice it until adulthood. Sometimes, that's just because they have a lighter version on the less extreme side of the spectrum. Other times, it's just neglect from teachers or parents. Some obvious signs may be, of course, that a child keeps mixing up the D and the B, or the P and the Q. This happens to all children at first, but to someone who has dyslexia, it keeps happening over and over again. Signs of dyslexia. Here are some of the signs that may indicate a child has dyslexia, whether that's an extreme or a light form. In a nutshell, comes across as smart, highly intelligent, and articulate, but not capable to read, write, or spell at the right grade level. Sometimes labeled as lazy, stupid, nonchalant, or just not trying hard enough. Is not a severe case, so the school won't help him or her. Has a high IQ level, but fails a lot of tests. Oral tests go well, but written ones don't. The kid feels inadequate and may have poor self-esteem, hides or covers up mistakes with clever social tactics or excuses, may get easily frustrated or upset about school reading or testing, has a lot of talent when it comes to art, acting, music, sports, mechanics, storytelling, selling, business, designing, building, or engineering. Spaces out a lot and gets more easily distracted or loses track of time. Has a hard time paying attention, seems hyper, or a daydreamer. The best learning experiences are more practical in nature, through hands-on experience, demonstrations, experimentation, observation, and visual aids. Seeing, reading, and spelling. May complain about dizziness, headaches, or stomach aches while he or she is reading. Confused by letters, numbers, words, sequences, or verbal explanations. Their reading or writing shows repetitions, additions, transpositions, omissions, substitutions, and reversals in letters, numbers, and/or words. indicates that he or she sees non-existent movement while reading, writing, or copying. It appears as if he or she has vision problems, but when they do an eye exam, nothing is wrong. Extremely keen-sighted and observant, or lacks depth perception and peripheral vision. Typically reads and rereads without understanding much of what is being read. Spells phonetically and inconsistently. Hearing and speech. Has extended hearing. The child may hear things not said or apparent to others. May be distracted by sounds more often. Has a hard time expressing thoughts with words. Speaks in halting phrases. Doesn't always finish sentences. May stutter under stress. Mispronounces longer words or transposes phrases, words, and symbols when he or she speaks up. Writing and motor skills. Trouble with writing or copying. Pencil grip is unusual. Handwriting varies or is illegible. Clumsy, uncoordinated, poor at ball or team sports. Difficulties with fine and or gross motor skills and tasks. Prone to motion sickness. Can be ambidextrous and often confuses left or right, over and under. Math and time management. Not good at telling or keeping track of time. Learning sequenced information or tasks, or being on time. Computing math shows dependence on finger counting and other tricks. Knows answers but cannot do it on paper. Can count but has a hard time dealing with money or doing math. Can do arithmetic but fails for word problems. Has a hard time understanding algebra or more advanced math. Memory and cognition. Great long-term memory when it concerns events, places, and people's faces. Bad memory when dealing with series or facts of information that has not been experienced. Thinks mostly with pictures and feelings, not so much sounds and words. The internal dialogue is more limited than that of others. Behavior, health, development, and personality. Either chaotic and unorganized, or compulsively orderly, a neat freak. May become the funny kid, troublemaker, or is too quiet. Has had typical early or late developmental stages in talking, crawling, walking, or tying shoes. Prone to ear infections, sensitive to foods, additives, and chemical products. Can be an extra deep or light sleeper. Bedwetting beyond appropriate ages. Unusually high or low tolerance for pain. Strong sense of justice. Emotionally sensitive. Wants to do everything perfectly. Mistakes and symptoms increase dramatically with confusion, time pressure, emotional stress, or being in bad shape or sick. Chapter 3. What are the benefits of dyslexia? Some studies have pointed out that many individuals with dyslexia have other areas of the brain that function in a more advanced way, and therefore they may lack a talent in one area but make up for it in another. Honestly, I think of my wife. When I see a word, I know for the rest of my life how it's spelled. I have high degrees and have achieved honors in high school and college. I speak 6 languages, have worked for a translation and grammar correcting agency, and have written many books under different pen names with little or no mistakes in them. But there is something I am terrible at. Practical things. Give me a screwdriver, cement, wood, saws, nails, or any other tool in a shop or garage, and I am stuck. For some reason, it always takes me longer to figure it out. Perhaps I am too precise or cautious. Perhaps I just don't see it immediately. My wife, on the other hand, who is dyslexic, has a hard time with punctuation, spelling, or anything that relates to words. She reads slowly, admits she guesses half of the words, and I always need to correct her papers or written media. But she is my other half in several ways, because she is all about being practical. She has fixed the car, the playground, the closets, the drain, the bathroom, the windows, and has done multiple other construction or handicraft projects that would take me a lot longer. Moreover, I don't enjoy them, and I get easily frustrated, even if it's just fixing a bicycle tire. Those who have dyslexia may have a brain that organized information in a different way. Perhaps they are better at seeing the big picture, which is why they don't have to focus on insignificant details anyways. Perhaps they are better at dealing with relationships, or negotiating, or guiding others to do the work for them. Seeing patterns doesn't always require good reading skills. It requires a certain spatial reasoning and mechanical ability to perceive relationships, subtle patterns, and shifting data and systems. Also, the ability to remember certain experiences, interpret abstract information, or connect the dots when it comes to music, art, or other less concrete things that don't involve a black and white kind of thinking style, are all useful and can be present in someone with dyslexia. I know people who are dyslexic, but they just have an ear for music, an eye for art, or a certain way of cooking that nobody else could perfect the same. Some diagnosed children and adults have shown dyslexic tendencies and therefore scored lower in verbal subjects like history, geography, mythology, literature, or storytelling. But some of them were geniuses when it came to building, designing, electronics, computers, inventing, and science. Their higher mechanical or mathematical skills were coming from a different part of the brain than the language expression typically does. We have all heard of using the left side of the brain more, or the right side. We've all heard of people who excelled in math but were terrible at languages, and the other way around. Just think of it that way, not as a mental disability of some sort. If everyone were good at words, then who would be the engineers, construction workers, mechanical thinkers, the visionaries, the inventors, the scientific discoverers, or the people who just get things done and not overanalyze everything? We need people who think differently like that. Society needs both. Brain structure differences. Even though every brain is different, the brains of people with dyslexia are particularly different compared to those without it. Dyslexic brains function in a deviant way because they are systemized differently. So when seen through a microscope, they even look different in a very literal sense. When using a sophisticated neuroimaging tool to study the mechanical and functional variances of dyslexic brains, it is evident what we are dealing with. Studies of brains donated to medical facilities and labs go way beyond our comprehension of developmental dyslexia in significant ways. Scientists found some structural differences in two parts of the dyslexic brain: the cerebral cortex and the thalamus. The cerebral cortex is the six-layered outer part of the brain involved in high-level processing, including sensory and motor analysis, working memory, attention, and language. The thalamus, a way station located in the middle of the brain, is the most crucial passing point for data transmitted from our five senses to the higher-level processing cerebral cortex. Microscopic research on the autopsied brains exposed variations in the arrangement of nerve cells and a smaller auditory region, which are both in the cerebral cortex. Measurement of the nerve cells in a visual and auditory parts of the thalamus showed smaller cells. These studies gave us the initial proof of a brain-based cause for developmental dyslexia. A different cerebral cortex. One of the changes in the cerebral cortex is about the ectopias. There are small groups of nerve cells, or neurons, and small groups of tangled nerve fibers, or axons. Think of a microscopic jellyfish with tangled tentacles, so you have an idea of what ectopias look like. What else sets them apart is where they are located, in the first layer of the cortical areas that are responsible for language. Nerve cells are usually not present in that top layer. These ectopias are caused by a change during neuronal migration, the journey all newborn neurons take to their final positions in the brain. However, some newborn cells don't get to their stops, travel too far, and end up in distant locations in the cortex, becoming changed in the process and linking to the rest of the brain in abnormal ways. Researchers are convinced that ectopias happen in the developing brain of the fetus before its 6th month, since most neurons find their final destination by that time. Because ectopias happens early in development, and because dyslexia often runs in families, experts assume genetic differences affecting early brain development are the cause of ectopias. The intriguing thing about ectopic neurons is that they appear to attach to neurons in other areas of the brain in different ways. Since most ectopias are in the language networks and the frontal area of the human brain connected to verbal memory, it becomes evident how a deviant wiring pattern may have an impact on the complicated process of learning to read and write properly. Something else that's different about the cortex is symmetry. This has been seen in research, both in autopsied brains and in neuroimaging studies of living people with dyslexia. In the human brain, there are two hemispheres, which look somewhat like mirror images. However, small size differences, or asymmetries, are there between the hemispheres. So that's the big difference. Studies have shown that the planum temporal, an auditory region that is part of the language network, is the same size in both sides of dyslexic brains. In other words, dyslexic brains are more symmetrical. What does this mean? It means that the planum temporal is usually bigger on the left side of the brain. So the asymmetric brain design of people without dyslexia is probably more efficient when it comes to processing sequential information and for learning specific language skills, such as reading, writing, and spelling. Symmetry of this area may limit learning to read and write. A different thalamus. Experts found another difference in autopsied dyslexic brains. Smaller neurons in specific cell clusters, or nuclei, of the thalamus. Those two nuclei are there for vision and hearing. Although nobody knows precisely how size relates to function, smaller neurons in the two locations may disrupt the exact timing that is needed to efficiently transmit information across brain networks. The challenge for researchers. Experts don't conclude that every stressed reader has those exact same structural brain differences, but the studies give us proof that some children's learning problems are brain-based, though not related to intelligence levels. The challenge for scientists is to decide on how these structural differences affect children's abilities to read faster and more accurately. Diversity and evolution. People with dyslexia have strengths and weaknesses, like everyone else, but an uneven number may have exceptional strengths that can enrich all our lives. And given the fact that environments always change, who knows what diverse minds people will hold in the future? One thing is clear: it should always be seen as different, not worse. If anyone with dyslexia is showing signs of, let's say, schizophrenia or autism, then their slow learning curve or unacceptable behavior could be attributed to that, and not to the fact that they have dyslexia. Some dyslexic success stories. I will give you some brief examples of people who are successful despite of dyslexia, or maybe because of it and the way they think for that reason. Whoopi Goldberg. Kids in school used to call her stupid because people weren't aware of the dyslexia as much back in the day. However, her mom told her not to listen to them. She said she could be anything she wanted to be. Whoopi believed her and grew up to become a comedian and talk show host, and one of only about a dozen people to have won a Grammy Award. She attributes thinking differently as a factor in helping her succeed. Steven Spielberg. The genius movie director Steven Spielberg wasn't diagnosed with dyslexia until he was in his 60s, so they didn't discover it in the beginning. School teachers used to think he was lazy. He was bullied by other kids, and his problems in school played a part in his career. Not only did making movies give him a way to channel his energy, but feeling like an outsider helped him co-write The Goonies, a hit movie about a peculiar group of friends who didn't quite fit in at school. He said finding out as an adult that he has dyslexia was like the last puzzle piece to a great mystery that I've kept to myself. Dyslexia is probably one of the most important factors that contributed to his creativity and his out-of-the-box thinking that made him the intelligent millionaire he has become. Octavia Spencer. Octavia Spencer has won an Academy Award and a Golden Globe for her acting. She's also a children's author who knows what a challenge reading can be for some kids. That's because Spencer has dyslexia. She vividly recalls how scared she was as a child when she had to read aloud in class. I was paralyzed with fear because I kept inverting words and dropping words, she had said. However, she stresses that dyslexia shouldn't prevent kids from pursuing their dreams. It doesn't really mean that you're not intelligent. It just means that your brain functions differently, she said. Tim Tebow. Former NFL quarterback Tim Tebow has dyslexia too. His dad and his brother have it as well, so it runs in their family. In elementary school, they discovered it, but he learned how to deal with it. Tebow is one of many NFL players who have been open about their learning and attention issues. It has to do with finding out how to learn, he said. I'm not somebody that opens a playbook and just turns and reads on like. So I just made flashcards. I take each one, and then boom, when I'm traveling, I just flip through it. That really helped me, writing it down, flipping through, and quizzing myself. That was a great way for me to do it. And there you go, that's how he learned it in the best way. Keira Knightley. After Keira Knightley was diagnosed with dyslexia at age 6, she used her love of acting to help motivate her to read. Knightley made a deal with her parents that if she worked on her reading each day, they would agree to hire her an agent. The Pirates of the Caribbean star did very well and kept her end of the bargain, using movie scripts to practice her reading skills. She became one of Hollywood's highest-earning actresses. So you see, dyslexia can be hard to deal with, but it can, 1, be overcome, and it won't force you to give up on your dreams. There is a lot you can achieve, just like all these people, despite of your dyslexia. But what's more, perhaps it's because of your dyslexia that you can achieve more than some who don't have it. At least, this was my conclusion from it all. Let's now take a look at where dyslexia comes from. Chapter 4. Where does dyslexia come from? Dyslexia has often been described as word blindness. After all, it's harder for them to see what the words say, But scientists and educators were always perplexed at the fact that those who had dyslexia were never blind in any other way. In fact, some of them had better eyesight than the ones who didn't have dyslexia. I briefly mentioned in the previous chapter that dyslexia often runs in the family. So the genetic origin of it affecting the nerve cells and therefore the deviances in the brain cannot be neglected. I know a family in which most of the children and one of the parents have dyslexia. This is no coincidence, especially since they have a lot of children, which makes it my point that much more valid. And that's not the only one. Therapists and teachers have often reported the same difficulties in learning when they meet siblings from the same family. In the mid-19th century in Germany, they did more research on the matter and came to the conclusion that there is such a thing as dyslexia, regardless of someone's intelligence, emotional well-being, or eyesight. Look up the question, are more young men than young ladies dyslexic? And you'll get urban myth bound with lecturing, not psychology or brain science. To state that boys' brains and girl brains of dyslexics work a similar route in generally a similar extent is crazy talk. This information is expected to help guardians, therapists, and teachers push towards diagnosing and treating formative dyslexia with a clearer comprehension of what we know today. More boys are dyslexic. Indeed, more young men are dyslexic. What's more, it might have some kind of effect on both analysis and treatment, so we can take that into account. We have to end the urban myth. The question, with respect to whether more young men than young ladies are dyslexic, has been answered. The issue is that when you Google, are more boys than girls dyslexic, the primary locales that presumable come up give an inaccurate answer. The revered public broadcasting service site PBS Parents isn't right. This is what you get. It was once thought that dyslexia is more common in boys than in girls, but recent research has shown that this is not the case. An equal number of girls and boys are dyslexic. It is thought that boys are more likely to act out as a result of having a reading difficulty and are therefore more likely to be identified early. Girls, on the other hand, are more likely to try and hide their difficulty, becoming quiet and reserved. How's that last joke for sex stereotyping? A University of Michigan dyslexia help website came to this conclusion. Although it used to be thought that more boys experience dyslexia than girls, current research has indicated that dyslexia occurs in approximately equal proportions. One possible explanation of this myth is that boys may be more likely to act out when experiencing difficulty, while girls may try to hide their trouble. Therefore, more boys would be recognized and diagnosed with dyslexia, falsely inflating the statistics. Wrong, wrong, terribly wrong. Websites like these sustain the myth. A compelling 1990 investigation by Shiowitz and others in the Journal of the American Medical Association placed that dyslexia just appeared to be significantly more typical in young men because of school recognizable proof systems. Dr. Sally Shiowitz kept on propelling the referral inclination idea, indicating that there was no huge distinction in the predominance of pursuing handicap in young men and young ladies in her broadly touted book, Overcoming Dyslexia, from 2003. She got a lot of media consideration incorporating highlights in Time and Newsweek magazines, alongside morning television shows on significant USA systems. The science isn't scrambled. Dyslexia is 2 to 3 times more prevalent in boys and men. Be that as it may, in 2004, there was a little touted turn around in the science. In less known, yet exceptionally regarded investigation, in 2004, Ritter and his associates found that dyslexia was a few times more common in boys than in girls. Of equivalent importance is the finding that school recognizable proof of dyslexia is to a great degree poor. In their 2013 examination, Quinn and other reports the accompanying. Perhaps the most surprising and potentially troubling result from the study was how few students who met research-based criteria for reading impairment were identified as learning disabled by their schools. Fewer than 20% of students were identified as meeting an operational definition of reading impairment, were also identified as learning disabled by their schools. Today, most teachers and numerous therapists stay ignorant. Boys' and girls' brains are definitely not the same. This has been confirmed by Dr. Guinevere Eden, professor of pediatrics at Georgetown University Medical Center and director of the Center for the Study of Learning, who is doing interesting mind imaging anatomical investigations to discover the appropriate responses. She indicates significant contrasts in the cerebrum structure of boys and girls. Brains of female dyslexics vary from female non-dyslexics in ways that don't mirror the distinctions they saw in boys with and without dyslexia. One might wonder what this is good for. Has nature, evolution, or God been dealing our disabilities in an unfair way? Well, think about it this way. We mentioned that dyslexia is often not just an inability to pick up reading as fast as others, but many times comes with talents and strengths that exceed those of others, such as artistic, technical, spatial, electronic, building, designing, electronics, computers, inventing, and science. Isn't it interesting to see that boys in particular, who often become husbands and fathers, and therefore, more often than not, the main providers, have skills to pay the bills? They are the ones fulfilling the gaps in society in construction, designing, and technical jobs. I have rarely seen an inspector, construction worker, or technician that was female. It's not impossible, but it's less common. And this may be one of the reasons. It's similar to the question some may ask, what about autism? Why is the chance for a boy to be autistic 5 times higher, according to research, than it is for girls? Now, don't get me wrong, autism is something completely different than dyslexia, and the two shouldn't even be mentioned in the same sentence unless a person happens to have both. But a similar answer sheds light on this issue. Doesn't it make sense for people with autism who get hyper-focused on one topic, stuck in their own world, and more interested in things and processes than in people and relationships, to be the ones who go out there building factories, fixing electrical lines, erecting large structures, figuring out computer data, and doing all sorts of activities that require a certain sense of loneliness they wouldn't care about? In other words, someone who would be too social, caring, and good with relationships might get bored, depressed, or frustrated doing these tedious or highly technical jobs. But someone with autism wouldn't. Personally, I am glad not everyone is interested in or good at the same things. There are so many jobs that require more practical skills than reading or writing. If everyone would be good at the same things, everyone would do the same thing. In a way, we should be thanking God, nature, or evolution for the fact that some in society have a deviant brain and are therefore more inclined to and interested in, and perhaps more talented to do those activities that require other skills. Chapter 5. What to do with children who have dyslexia. To combat the problems of dyslexia, simple steps need to be taken. These steps are: establish if it really is a case of dyslexia. Determine which type of dyslexia it is. Find out how severe it is. Establish the best training program. Hire the right professionals. get the right materials, and make a plan and execute that plan. This is a simple formula with a lot of gaps to fill. Let me expand on some of these steps to clarify them. The 6 different types of dyslexia. In a sense, there are 6 types of dyslexia, and some are more common than others. I will discuss these now. Primary dyslexia. This is the most common type. It means the left side of the brain is not functioning properly, but not because of a certain kind of damage. It doesn't change with age. It's rooted in the cerebral cortex, and it is often the result of a family DNA that has been passed down to the next generation. Most people with this type of dyslexia can learn how to read as well as any other person, and through education, be equally successful in similar areas that are related to writing and reading. There are exceptions, however, who will always struggle with spelling, reading, or writing until the day they leave this world. Genes are the main cause, and it is more common to find it in boys than in girls. Secondary or developmental dyslexia. This is a consequence of brain development issues in the early stages of the development of the fetus. The older the child gets, the more the dyslexia features will diminish. Although it is more common in boys, just like primary dyslexia, it is a different type, and there is less risk of struggling for the rest of someone's life. Trauma dyslexia. This type is usually something that happens when there is a brain injury or trauma. This could be because of an accident, abuse, or something else. The injury has affected the part of the brain that is used for reading and writing. Needless to say that this is not very prevalent among children and happens less frequently in a general sense. Visual dyslexia. Although this type is sometimes counted as something completely else, it is often referred to as a form of dyslexia, and it has to do with visual processing disorder, a condition where the brain doesn't interpret visual signals in the right way. This is also less common. Auditory dyslexia. This term refers to auditory processing disorder, which is similar to visual processing disorder, but of course, the problems lie in the brain's ability to process sounds and speech. And of course, this is also a rare condition. Dysgraphia. This type of dyslexia is related to a child's inability to hold and control a pencil properly, and naturally, this problem is mostly crucial when writing, not typing or reading. Somehow, the brain has a difficult time with the hand-eye coordination and other muscles controlling signals. Sloppy handwriting and spelling mistakes can be the consequence of this. In the next chapter, we'll go over 4 different treatments you can use to improve your child's spelling and ability to read. Chapter 6. Training Techniques. Of course, there are tons of programs out there, and when you look it up, you may come across all kinds of websites that try to sell you their fun books, their phonetic word games, software, TV shows, or other materials. These can all be helpful, and it's up to you to decide on your budget, the most effective materials, and how much time you will spend or save with those products. For now, I would like to point out several methods that can greatly enhance the learning process of dyslexic children. Some may work better for some children, and others are susceptible to other techniques. Every brain is different, so don't get discouraged if not all these things work, or if it still takes a lot of patience and personal attention. Each of these are basic methods and can be applied in a variety of ways. Always adjust your approach to the child's needs, if possible. 1. Education. Dyslexia isn't any physical sickness that can be dealt with by popping drugs. You can treat this reading issue by learning more about it, and furthermore, by teaching yourself. In this type of treatment, the instructor is given some particular preparing relating to the necessities of these extraordinary children. The teacher will be the proper training, sight and hearing treatment that will be used for the child to help him or her with their reading skills. The strategies utilized can be through understanding letters or words using a finger. These experts will take care of enhancing the child's ability to perceive the phonemes or the littlest sounds that can shape a word. The pro will likewise lead sessions for reading out loud that will help the kid in correcting the articulations and also the understanding of the words. During this therapy course, the parents of the dyslexic child must also contribute in the treatment. You must assess the teacher by providing timely feedback and improvement results of the child with dyslexia. Phonemic awareness. This refers to recognizing sounds or phonemes of the spoken word. The treatment that focuses on this has the goal to help the child identify patterns with which the words are shaped. The child will learn to produce sounds from printed or written words to pronounce them better. He or she will also learn to spell and write in order to improve the comprehension of those phonetics and meanings that belong to the specific word. Vocabulary training. In this treatment, the child will be instructed to improve his or her ability in comprehending and remembering vocabulary. The parents will be taught to help the child learn his or her vocabulary as well. These trainings are typically provided by language specialists. Language fluency training. In fluency training sessions, the dyslexic child will be taught to read out loud and write the words after recognizing them. This process aids in empowering the fluency of the child over a particular language. The best way to do it is through multiple sessions of reading aloud, identifying words and sounds, sessions on phonemes, etc. Dyslexia can be healed or dealt with by working on the brain. When those sessions will be conducted simultaneously, there will be increased pressure on the weak areas of the brain that disrupt the reading abilities. Therefore, they will help in improving the fluency of the child, and in that way, improve the reading ability. Chapter 7. Speed Reading Techniques. In this chapter, I will address some of the most important techniques experts use to increase their reading speed. Similar or the same techniques can also be used, in many cases, to increase accuracy and general reading skills. Rereading the words on a page is bad. This is a negative behavior pattern many individuals have created, and it stops your progress. So stop rereading the words. When you watch somebody read, his or her eyes move around a great deal, yet they don't stream uniformly forward and backward as they should. Many individuals backtrack over words they have just read. All things considered, obviously, you should think about the importance of what you read. But the principal message is what makes a difference. The words to get that message across matter less. You most likely haven't seen that you are doing it, which makes it precarious to stop. One of the most effortless approaches to get out from under this tendency is to use your finger to guide you along. Furthermore, despite the fact this may have all the notions of being immature, it can help. One of the best ways to get started with speed reading is to stop doing something that is called subvocalization. It's common for a lot of readers to repeat the words in their heads. It makes sense that people do this, because that is the speed at which they talk. But if you want to read faster than the speed at which people talk, this is something that is getting in your way, and you need to break the habit. Everyone hears voices inside their head when they read, and that's not a bad thing. It's the way children learn how to read it, by reading out loud or quietly saying them in their heads. So as a young reader, you're already acquired the habit of an inner monologue by following the teacher's instructions. And even though this habit taught you how to read correctly, reading faster requires you to turn the same voice off, since it slows your reading down tremendously. Instead of taking in information, it's like you're having a conversation, and this is often not the purpose of reading. The average reading speed, which is talking speed, is about 300 words per minute. If you want to read 500 words or even 1,000 words per minute, that voice needs to shut up. Seriously, tell it to shut up. The first step in turning off that inner voice is to realize that you need to turn it off. I just told you this, so you already took the first step. Funny how that works. Say to yourself that you are not obligated to say each word in your head to grasp the meaning of the information you're studying, or even the story you are reading. We read lots of things every day without thinking about the words, and that's exactly the habit you need to acquire. You should start with automatically processing the information without standing still. An example of how to do this is by listening to music, chewing gum, or doing something else while reading. Do that, and you will still read the words without the inner monologue. And that's the whole goal. Also, when you get older and more experienced, train yourself to read multiple words at once. And it's one of the most important aspects of reading faster. It's one of the key elements of speed reading. Try to read 3 words with one glance. Do that throughout the entire page of your book, and observe how much faster you are learning. You will still understand what the text is about, but you are wasting less time on it. Do it again, but this time you take a pencil and draw 2 light, horizontal lines down your page. This way, you will separate the page into 3 different parts. Then take a piece of paper and cover the section underneath the one you are reading. Like a road sign, you glance at an entire paragraph or third of a page, trying to take in the information as fast as possible. At an advanced level, skim over the text and try to understand the main message of it before you start reading. Calm down, sit down, and take some time to read over the main points before you move on. Read the table of contents, the subtitles, and flip or scroll through the pages. Get an overall feel of what you're going to read, and begin to understand the topics and main message the writer wants to bring across. With that in mind, the rest of it is just filling in the gaps or clarifying the main points with examples, statements, or additional details. Also, read the conclusion of each chapter before you begin, if there is one. Read a small part in the middle, and you'll get an idea of what the main topic is. The last paragraph usually summarizes the text. This way, you can retain information better, and when you read something you already know, you can just say, "Now they are just repeating themselves," and go on to the next paragraph, chapter, or book. If you want to make reading easier and faster, you can also use a book stand, angling your reading material at 45 degrees, which will increase your speed and decrease your eye strain. Your mind and body are usually relaxed in bed, so don't read things that are too complicated. Stay alert and sit up. This way, you'll be faster at reading. Hand pacing techniques. Pacing yourself is the quickest way to speed read. Sit in a 45-degree angle and be comfortable. You can put your elbow on the table. Use only one hand to hold the book or magazine, and the other to point. Place the pointing finger at the first word, then pace yourself by moving it along the lines. Your eyes should focus at where your finger is pointing. Just keep moving the pointing finger while you are reading. When you are completely done, go to the next line. Your finger determines your speed. Adjust the speed according to your understanding of the text. Don't worry about missing words. It's all about keeping the pace up and getting a general understanding of the text. Tell your mind to go much faster every time you do this. Let your thoughts flow. Don't be stiff. Slow down when the material is more difficult or complex. Start again when you realize you have stopped pacing. The more you read, the better you get at it. It is that simple. And you might start enjoying it more too. Speed reading techniques can really help people to progress and take in more information.